Welcome to Santa Lucia Farm, a heartwarming tale of unexpected love and healing. Join Jessica Wright as she escapes a broken heart in Chicago and finds herself working on a charming farm where Murilo Santos and his rescue animals might just mend her wounded soul. What was meant to be a one-week stay could become something much more meaningful. Before we begin this story, comment below where you're watching from. Jessica Wright stared out the dusty bus window as farmland rolled by, mile after endless mile. Her reflection showed tired eyes and a face that hadn't smiled in weeks. 27 years old and running away again. She clutched her backpack closer, everything she owned now fitting into one bag. Last stop before Riverdale, the bus driver called out. Santa Lucia Farm Road. Jessica grabbed her things and stepped into the afternoon heat. The bus pulled away, leaving her in a cloud of dust on a country road that stretched in both directions. She pulled a crumpled newspaper from her pocket and read the circled ad again. Help needed for 1 week at Santa Lucia Farm. Light work. Food and lodging included. She'd called on impulse yesterday. A woman named Rosa had answered, giving brief directions in a warm but businesslike tone. 1 week of manual labor in exchange for a roof and meals seemed like the perfect hiding place. Jessica adjusted her backpack and started walking. The afternoon sun beat down on her shoulders, but she welcomed the discomfort. Physical pain was easier to handle than what she'd left behind in Chicago, a relationship that had crumbled beneath her, leaving nothing but sharp edges and sleepless nights. After 15 minutes of walking, she spotted the wooden sign, Santa Lucia Farm. The gravel driveway led to a sprawling farmhouse with a wide front porch. The place wasn't fancy, but it had character. Weathered wood, blue shutters, and pots of flowers that added splashes of color. As Jessica approached, a pickup truck came rumbling down the driveway. It stopped beside her, and a man leaned out. The window. "You must be Jessica," he said, his voice deep but gentle. "I'm Murilo Santos. Welcome to Santa Lucia." Jessica nodded, taking in the man before her. He was around 30, with suntanned skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His eyes were kind, but they carried a quiet sadness that felt familiar. "I was expecting Rosa," Jessica said, instantly regretting how ungrateful she sounded. Murilo smiled. "Rosa's my housekeeper. She handles most of the calls, but she's in town getting supplies." He gestured to the passenger seat. "Hop in. I'll take you up to the house." Jessica hesitated only a moment before climbing into the truck. The less walking in this heat, the better. "How was your trip?" Murilo asked as they drove toward the house. "Fine," Jessica replied, staring straight ahead. She didn't want questions, didn't want conversation. She'd come here to work with her hands and silence her mind. Murilo seemed to understand. He didn't press further, just nodded and kept driving. The farmhouse looked even larger up close. Behind it, Jessica could see several barns, a greenhouse, and fenced pastures where animals grazed lazily in the afternoon sun. "It's not what I expected," Jessica admitted as they parked. "What were you expecting?" Murilo asked, genuinely curious. "I don't know. Something more industrial, I guess. This looks more like a sanctuary than a working farm." A small smile touched Murilo's lips. "That's because it is. Part farm, part animal rescue. My grandfather ran it as a traditional cattle operation, but I've made some changes over the years." He led her up the porch steps and opened the front door. Inside, the house was airy and comfortable, not fancy, but clean and welcoming. "Rosa's prepared the guest room for you upstairs," Murilo said. "I'll show you around and then you can get settled. Work starts tomorrow, so you have the evening to rest." Jessica followed him through the house, barely registering his words about where the bathroom was and when meals were served. All she could think about was being alone, finding quiet, stopping the noise in her head. "This is your room," Murilo said, opening a door to reveal a simple but pleasant bedroom with blue curtains and a handmade quilt on the bed. "Thank you," Jessica said, the first genuine words she'd spoken since arriving. "It's lovely." Murilo nodded. "Dinner's at 6. Join us if you feel up to it. If not, the kitchen's always open." He paused, studying her face for a moment. "Jessica, I don't know what brought you here, and I won't ask. But I hope you find whatever you're looking for. With that, he turned and walked back down the hall, leaving Jessica standing in the doorway, clutching her backpack like a shield. Once alone, she sat on the edge of the bed and finally let out the breath she'd been holding. 1 week, she could do anything for 1 week, and then she'd move on, just like always. Jessica unpacked her few belongings and took a long shower, washing away the dust of travel. By the time 6 o'clock rolled around, her stomach was growling loudly enough to convince her to venture downstairs. She found Murillo and an older woman, Rosa, she presumed, in the kitchen. The smell of home cooking filled the air, making Jessica realize how long it had been since she'd had a proper meal. "There she is," Rosa said warmly. "Come in, dear. Dinner's just ready." Rosa was in her 60s, with silver-streaked black hair, and a face that showed both hardship and joy in its lines. She moved around the kitchen with the confidence of someone who had called this place home for many years. "Jessica, this is Rosa Mendez," Murillo said. "She's been with Santa Lucia longer than I have." "Since this boy was in diapers," Rosa confirmed, with a fond smile at Murillo. "Now sit, both of you. Food gets cold while mouths talk." They ate at the kitchen table, roast chicken, vegetables from the garden, and fresh bread that melted in Jessica's mouth. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first bite, and then she couldn't stop eating. Someone was hungry, Rosa observed with satisfaction. "It's delicious," Jessica admitted. "Thank you." "Tomorrow you'll start in the greenhouse with me," Murillo said, changing the subject smoothly. Nothing too strenuous for the first day, just getting familiar with the place. Jessica nodded, grateful that he wasn't pushing her to talk. "That sounds fine." After dinner, Murillo excused himself, saying he needed to check on a sick goat in one of the barns. Jessica offered to help with the dishes, but Rosa shooed her away. "First night is for settling in," she insisted. "Go explore if you want. The porch swing is nice this time of evening." Jessica took her advice and wandered onto the front porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. She sat on the swing, pushing gently with her foot to set it in motion. In the distance, she could see Murillo walking toward one of the barns, his figure silhouetted against the twilight. There was something about the way he moved, confident, but gentle. That made Jessica curious despite herself. The night air carried the sound of piano music from somewhere inside the house. The melody was simple but beautiful, tinged with a sadness that resonated with something deep inside her. Jessica closed her eyes and let the music wash over her, a momentary peace in the storm she'd been living through. When she opened her eyes again, Murillo was walking back from the barn. He paused when he saw her, then approached the porch. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Jessica shook her head, moving over to make room on the swing. "Is that Rosa playing the piano?" she asked as he sat down. "No, that's a recording," Murillo replied. "I usually play in the evenings, but tonight I had barn duty." "You play?" Jessica couldn't hide her surprise. "My mother taught me," he said, a fond smile crossing his face. She believed everyone should have at least one thing in their life that was just for beauty's sake. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, crickets, distant frogs, the occasional lowing of cattle. "Thank you," Jessica said finally, "for not asking questions." Murillo nodded. "Everyone deserves their privacy. Besides, it's only for a week, right? You'll be gone before we even get to know each other." His words were matter of fact, with no hint of accusation or disappointment. Still, Jessica felt a strange twinge at the thought of leaving so soon. "Right," she agreed. "Just a week and then I'll be on my way again." Morning came too quickly. Jessica woke to the sound of roosters and the smell of coffee drifting up from the kitchen. For a moment, she forgot where she was, reaching instinctively for the warm body that should have been beside her. But the bed was empty, and the memories came flooding back. The arguments, the betrayal, the final devastating goodbye. She pushed the thoughts away and got dressed in jeans and a simple t-shirt. Downstairs, she found Rosa humming in the kitchen, flipping pancakes on an old cast-iron griddle. "Good morning, sunshine," Rosa greeted her. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in weeks," Jessica admitted, accepting the cup of coffee Rosa handed her. "This place has that effect on people," Rosa said with a knowing smile. "Murillo's already out in the greenhouse. He said to send you over when you've had breakfast." Jessica ate quickly, eager to start working. The sooner she got busy, the less time she'd have to think. The greenhouse was larger than it had looked from a distance, a sprawling structure of glass and metal that gleamed in the morning sun. Jessica found Murillo inside, kneeling beside a row of seedlings, carefully transferring them to larger pots. "Good morning," she said, standing awkwardly in the doorway. Murillo looked up and smiled. "Morning. Ready to get those hands dirty?" For the next few hours, Jessica worked alongside him, learning how to transplant seedlings, mix soil, and adjust the greenhouse irrigation system. The work was methodical and soothing, requiring just enough concentration to keep her mind occupied, without being overwhelming. "You're good at this," Murillo observed as he watched her gently pat soil around a tomato plant. "Ever worked in a garden before?" Jessica shook her head. "My apartment in Chicago had a fire escape where I grew some herbs, but nothing like this." "Chicago," Murillo repeated. "Big change, coming to a place like Santa Lucia." It wasn't a question, so Jessica didn't feel pressured to explain. Instead, she asked, "How did you end up here, running a farm and animal sanctuary?" Murillo wiped his hands on his jeans, leaving streaks of dirt. "I grew up here. My grandfather built this place, and my parents took over when he got sick. After they died, car accident when I was 20. I thought about selling it, had a whole other life planned out, but something kept me here." "What was that something?" Jessica asked, surprised by her own curiosity. Murillo was quiet for a moment. "Have you ever been somewhere and just felt right? Like you were exactly where you needed to be?" Jessica thought about it. "No," she said honestly. "I've never had that feeling. Not anywhere." Murillo looked at her with those quiet, understanding eyes. "Maybe you just haven't found your place yet." After lunch, Murillo took Jessica on a tour of the rest of the farm. There were chickens that roamed freely during the day, a small herd of cattle that grazed in the back pasture, and a barn full of rescue animals, horses, goats, even an aging donkey named Walter, who brayed loudly when they entered. Most of these animals came from bad situations, Murillo explained as they walked through the barn. Neglect, abuse, or owners who just couldn't care for them anymore. In a pen near the back, several baby goats frolicked, playing a game that involved jumping on and off a wooden spool. "These little ones were born here," Murillo said, opening the gate and stepping inside. "Their mother was rescued from a petting zoo that shut down. She was pregnant and half-starved when she arrived." The baby goats immediately swarmed around Murillo, butting their heads against his legs and bleating for attention. He laughed, a rich, warm sound that surprised Jessica. It was the first time she'd heard him laugh. "Want to hold one?" he asked, scooping up a small black and white kid. Before Jessica could answer, he was placing the baby goat in her arms. The animal squirmed for a moment, then settled against her chest, its tiny heart beating rapidly. "Hello, little one," Jessica whispered, stroking its soft head. She looked up to find Murillo watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Something warm flickered in his eyes, then disappeared so quickly she thought she might have imagined it. "What's this one's name?" she asked. "She doesn't have one yet," Murillo replied. "Would you like to name her?" Jessica looked down at the kid in her arms. "Hope," she said softly. "Her name is Hope." That evening, as the sun was setting, Jessica found herself drawn back to the goat pen. The babies were settling down for the night, cuddling together in a pile of hay. Hope looked up as Jessica approached, then trotted over to the fence, bleating softly. "Hello again," Jessica said, reaching through the fence to stroke the little goat's head. "She remembers you," came Murillo's voice from behind her. Jessica turned to find him leaning against the barn door, watching her with a slight smile. "Animals are good judges of character," he continued, walking over to stand beside her. "They know who they can trust." "I wish people were that easy to read," Jessica said without thinking. Murillo nodded. "People are complicated. We hide things, even from ourselves sometimes." Jessica didn't respond, but she felt his words settle somewhere deep inside her. They stood in companionable silence, watching the baby goats until the last light faded from the sky. That night, lying in bed, Jessica realized something startling. She hadn't thought about Chicago or her ex all day. The pain was still there, a dull ache beneath her ribs, but for the first time in months it hadn't consumed her every waking thought. As she drifted off to sleep, she found herself wondering what Murillo's story was. What had made him the kind of man who rescued broken animals and asked no questions of broken people? 1 day down, 6 to go. And then she'd be gone, moving on to wherever the road took her next. But for tonight at least, Santa Lucia Farm felt like exactly where she needed to be. The next morning, Jessica woke before sunrise. She lay in bed for a moment, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the farm, roosters crowing, cattle lowing in the distance, the soft creak of the old house as it settled. For the first time in months, she hadn't dreamed of Chicago. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs, surprised to find the kitchen empty. A note on the counter caught her eye. "Gone to town for supplies. Coffee is ready. Help yourself. To breakfast. Rosa." Jessica poured herself a cup of coffee and stepped out onto the porch. The sky was just beginning to lighten, painting the horizon in shades of pink and gold. In the distance, she could see a figure moving among the animals. Murillo, already at work. Without really thinking about it, Jessica set down her coffee and headed toward the barn. The morning air was cool against her skin, and dew sparkled on the grass beneath her feet. "Morning," Murillo called when he spotted her. He was in the goat pen, measuring formula into bottles for the babies. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," Jessica admitted, leaning against the fence. "Need some help?" Murillo handed her a bottle. "Hope's been waiting for you." Sure enough, the little black and white kid came bounding over, bleating excitedly when she saw Jessica. Jessica climbed into the pen and sat cross-legged on the ground. Hope immediately scrambled into her lap, eagerly accepting the bottle. "She's really taken to you," Murillo observed, sitting nearby with 2 other baby goats clamoring for his attention. "I've never had a way with animals before," Jessica said, smiling as Hope's tail wiggled happily while she drank. "But there's something special about this little one. Sometimes connections just happen," Murillo said, his eyes on the goats rather than on Jessica. No rhyme or reason to it. They fed the babies in comfortable silence, the only sounds the contented suckling and the occasional bleat of impatience, when a bottle emptied too quickly. "What's on the agenda today?" Jessica asked as they finished up. "The vegetable garden needs weeding," Murillo replied, "and I thought you might help me with the horses this afternoon. One of the rescues is still pretty skittish around people. I've been working with her, but she might respond better to a woman's touch." Jessica nodded, secretly pleased that he trusted her with something so important. "I'd like that." After breakfast, they spent the morning in the vegetable garden, pulling weeds and harvesting early summer vegetables. The work was physical and satisfying, leaving little room for thought. Jessica found herself relaxing into the rhythm of it. The pull of roots from soil, the gentle snap of beans from their vines, the earthy smell that rose up around them. "You're a natural at this," Murillo commented as he watched her carefully. "Pick cherry tomatoes, selecting only the ripest ones." "It's peaceful," Jessica replied. "Working with your hands, seeing immediate results. In my old job, I'd work for weeks on a project and then watch it get buried in meetings and red tape." It was the first time she'd volunteered any information about her previous life, and she could tell Murillo noticed, though he didn't press for details. "What did you do? Before, I mean," he asked casually, continuing to work alongside her. Jessica hesitated, then said, "Marketing. For a big healthcare company in Chicago, it paid well, but it didn't feed your soul," Murillo finished when she trailed off. Jessica looked at him, surprised. "Yes, exactly. How did you know?" Murillo shrugged. "Just a guess. Most people who end up here are looking for something their regular lives weren't giving them." "Do you get a lot of drifters like me?" she asked. "Not as many as you might think. Rosa handles most of the hiring. She's got a sixth sense about people, who need Santa Lucia and who's just looking for a paycheck." Jessica thought about that as they continued working. Had Rosa somehow known that she needed this place? The thought was both comforting and unsettling. Lunchtime, they had filled several baskets with fresh produce. Rosa, back from town, clucked approvingly as they carried their harvest into the kitchen. Perfect timing, she said. I'm making gazpacho for lunch. Those tomatoes will be perfect. After lunch, true to his word, Murillo took Jessica to the horse paddock. 5 horses grazed peacefully in the summer sunshine, but one stood apart from the others, a chestnut mare with wary eyes that watched their approach nervously. "That's Penny," Murillo said softly. "She came to us about a month ago. Previous owner used to beat her when she didn't perform well at shows. She's still learning that not all humans are cruel." Jessica felt a pang of sympathy for the beautiful animal. "What do I do?" "Just talk to her," Murillo advised. "Let her hear your voice. Get used to your presence. Don't try to touch her yet. Just be near her." They entered the paddock slowly, and Murillo showed Jessica how to avoid making sudden movements. That might startle the horses. The other horses came over curiously, nudging them for treats, but Penny kept her distance, watching with those cautious eyes. Jessica sat on a stump near the fence, not looking directly at Penny, but keeping her in her peripheral vision. Softly, she began to talk. "Hello, Penny," she said. "You're very beautiful. I'm Jessica. I'm just visiting here, but I'd like to be your friend while I'm around." She continued talking, keeping her voice low and soothing, sharing innocuous details about the weather, the farm, the other animals. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, Penny began to graze a little closer to where Jessica sat. Murillo, who had been grooming one of the other horses nearby, caught Jessica's eye and gave her an encouraging nod. After about an hour, Penny had moved, close enough that Jessica could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. The mare was still tense, still ready to bolt at any sudden movement, but she was choosing to be closer rather than farther away. "That's enough for today," Murillo said, quietly, coming to stand beside Jessica. "You've done more in 1 hour than I've managed in a month." Jessica felt a rush of pride. She just needed someone who understands what it's like to be afraid. The words were out before she could stop them, and she felt her cheeks flush. Murillo didn't comment, but his eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. As they walked back to the house, Jessica found herself opening up a little more. "I left Chicago because of a relationship that ended badly," she said, staring straight ahead. "He was not who I thought he was." Murillo nodded, letting her talk without interruption. "We were together for 3 years, living together for 2. I thought we were building a life." Jessica's voice grew tight. "Turns out he was building a life with someone else at the same time." "I'm sorry," Murillo said simply, and Jessica appreciated that he didn't offer platitudes or empty reassurances. "Anyway, I couldn't stand being in that city anymore. Everything reminded me of him, of us. So I just left. No plan, no destination, just away." "And you ended up here," Murillo observed. "For a week," Jessica reminded him, though the words no longer felt as certain as they had a few days ago. "For a week," he agreed, but there was something in his tone that made her glance over at him. He was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, thoughtful maybe, or curious. That evening after dinner, Murillo disappeared into what Rosa called the music room. Soon the sound of piano music drifted through the house. Not a recording this time, but live playing, slightly imperfect but all the more beautiful for it. Jessica found herself drawn to the sound. She followed it to a room at the back of the house, where a baby grand piano stood near large windows that looked out onto the fields. Murillo sat at the keys, his back to the door, unaware of her presence. The piece he was playing was melancholy but lovely, full of emotion that surprised her. She stood silently, watching his hands move across the keys, seeing a side of him that seemed at odds with the practical farmer she'd come to know. When the piece ended, Jessica couldn't help but applaud softly. Murillo turned, startled. "Sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to intrude. The music was so beautiful I couldn't help following it." Murillo smiled, but there was a hint of embarrassment in it. "It's not intruding. I usually play with the door open. I just don't usually have an audience." "What was that piece?" Jessica asked, stepping into the room. "Chopin. Nocturne in E-flat major." Murillo closed the piano lid gently. "My mother used to play it." "She taught you well," Jessica said, sitting on a nearby chair. "She tried," Murillo replied with a soft laugh. "I was a reluctant student, too busy wanting to be outside with the animals. It wasn't until after she was gone that I realized what, a gift she'd given me. Jessica nodded, understanding. Sometimes we don't appreciate things until we've lost them. Murillo looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing her properly for the first time. Yes, he said quietly. That's exactly it. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sounds of the farm settling down for the night. May I ask you something? Jessica said finally. Of course. Rosa mentioned that there's never been anyone special in your life, at least not recently. Is that true? Murillo's expression shuttered slightly, but he nodded. Rosa talks too much, but yes, it's true. But why? Jessica stopped, suddenly aware of how personal the conversation had become. I'm what? Murillo prompted, a hint of challenge in his voice. Jessica felt her cheeks warm. Kind. Intelligent. Not exactly hard on the eyes, she added, trying to keep her tone light. It just seems like you'd have women lining up at the farm gate. Murillo laughed, but there was little humor in it. There was someone once, a long time ago. Jessica waited, sensing there was more to the story. Her name was Elena, Murillo continued after a pause. We grew up together, went to the same schools. Everyone assumed we'd get married someday. His eyes took on a faraway look. After my parents died, things got complicated. I was grieving, trying to figure out how to run this place. She wanted me to sell it, move to the city with her. But you couldn't, Jessica guessed. Murillo nodded. This place isn't just land and buildings to me. It's my heritage, my responsibility. Elena couldn't understand that. She gave me an ultimatum, her or the farm. He shrugged. I chose the farm. She left. Last I heard, she's married with kids in Seattle. Do you regret it? Jessica asked softly. Murillo considered the question. I regret hurting her. I regret that we couldn't find a middle ground, but no, I don't regret keeping Santa Lucia. This place has saved more lives than I can count. Animals and people. People? Jessica echoed. Rosa was homeless when my grandfather hired her 30 years ago. Our farm manager, Miguel, you haven't met him yet, he's visiting family this week, was a troubled teenager headed for jail when he came to work here. This place has a way of healing broken things. Jessica thought about that, about her own broken heart and how just a few days at Santa Lucia had begun to ease the constant ache she'd been carrying since Chicago. I can believe that, she said quietly. They talked for another hour, about lighter things, funny stories about the animals, the history of the farm, Jessica's childhood in a small town in Michigan. When Jessica finally yawned, unable to hide her tiredness any longer, Murillo walked her to the stairs. Thank you, he said, for listening. I don't usually talk about Elena. Thank you for trusting me with it, Jessica replied. She hesitated, then added, Good night, Murillo. Good night, Jessica, he said, and there was a warmth in the way he said her name that followed her up the stairs and into her dreams. The next morning, Jessica was awakened by the sound of rain pounding on the roof. She pulled back the curtains to see grey skies and water streaming down the windows. The farm looked different in the rain, softer somehow, the colours more intense against the muted backdrop. Downstairs, she found Rosa in the kitchen, kneading dough for bread. Morning, dear, Rosa greeted her. Hope you brought an umbrella because it's coming down cats and dogs out there. I didn't, Jessica admitted. But I don't mind getting a little wet, Rosa chuckled. A little wet. You'll be soaked to the bone. Then 2 seconds flat. Murillo's in the barn dealing with a leak in the roof. He left these for you. She pointed to a rain jacket and boots by the door, both clearly too large for Jessica. They'll swallow you whole, but they'll keep you dry, Rosa added. Coffee's hot and there's oatmeal on the stove. The barn was warm and smelled of hay and animals. Jessica found Murillo up on a ladder, patching a hole in the roof where water had been dripping through. Several buckets on the floor caught the E. Remaining drops. Need a hand? She called up to him. Murillo looked down, smiling when he saw her swimming in his oversized rain gear. Looks like Rosa found you something to wear. I feel like a little kid playing dress-up, Jessica laughed, holding up arms where the sleeves hung well past her fingertips. It suits you, Murillo said, climbing down the ladder. Rain changes our plans for today. Too wet for the garden, and the horses won't want to come out of their shelter. So what do we do instead? Jessica asked. Inside work. The feed storage room needs organizing, and I've been meaning to fix that broken stall door for weeks. They spent the morning working side by side in the barn, the sound of rain on the metal roof creating a cozy backdrop to their tasks. Jessica found herself humming as she sorted feed bags and swept the concrete floor, surprising herself with how content she felt despite the menial labor. During a break, they sat on hay bales drinking coffee from a thermos Rosa had sent with them. Jessica found herself studying Murillo's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the tiny crow's feet around his eyes that deepened when he smiled. "What?" he asked, catching her gaze. "Nothing," Jessica said quickly. "Just thinking." "About?" She hesitated, then decided on honesty. "About how different this week is turning out than what I expected. Is that good or bad?" Murillo asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Good," Jessica admitted. "Definitely good." Something flickered in Murillo's eyes. Relief, maybe, or pleasure. "I'm glad," he said simply. The rain continued all day, heavy at times, then tapering to a gentle patter before picking up again. By evening, the land around the farmhouse had turned muddy, with puddles reflecting the grey sky. After dinner, Jessica helped Rosa with the dishes, while Murillo went to check on the animals one last time before bed. "He likes you," Rosa said matter-of-factly. As she handed Jessica a plate to dry, Jessica nearly dropped it. "What?" "Murillo. He likes you," Rosa repeated. "I haven't seen him this relaxed around someone new in years." "We're just getting along well as co-workers," Jessica said, focusing intently on drying the plate in her hands. Rosa made a dismissive sound. "Girl, I've been around long enough to know the difference between getting along and something more. The way that boy looks at you when you're not watching." She shook her head. "But it's not my business, just an old woman's observation." Jessica didn't know how to respond, so she changed the subject. "The bread you made today was amazing." Rosa accepted the pivot gracefully. Old family recipe. "My grandmother taught me, and her grandmother taught her. Some things are meant to be passed down." Later, as Jessica lay in bed listening to the rain, she found herself thinking about Rosa's words. The way that boy looks at you when you're not watching. Her heart beat a little faster at the thought. This wasn't part of the plan. She'd come to Santa Lucia to escape, to hide, to lick her wounds in private, not to develop feelings for someone new, especially not someone as rooted to one place as Murillo Santos. 3 days down, 4 to go. The thought, which had been a comfort, when she arrived, now brought a twinge of something like regret. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the world clean, making way for new growth. The rain continued through the night and into the next morning. Jessica woke to the sound of water dripping from the eaves and the soft rumble of distant thunder. The world outside her window was misty and grey, the farm buildings half hidden in the foggy air. She dressed quickly and headed downstairs, where she found Murillo in the kitchen, wrestling with a leaky faucet. "Morning," he greeted her, his voice muffled as he reached under the sink. "Coffee's ready. Rosa had to go into town for a doctor's appointment. The roads are a mess, so I told her to stay in town tonight with her sister if the weather doesn't." "Clear. Is she okay?" Jessica asked, concerned. "Just a regular checkup," Murillo assured her, emerging from under the sink with a wrench in his hand. "Nothing to worry about." Jessica poured herself a cup of coffee, suddenly aware that she and Murillo would be alone on the farm today, and possibly tonight. The thought sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach. "Still raining," she observed, looking out the window. "Forecast says it should clear by afternoon," Murillo replied, testing the faucet. Water flowed smoothly with no drips. "There we go. Fixed." "You're good with your hands," Jessica said, then felt her cheeks warm at how the words sounded. If Murillo noticed her embarrassment, he didn't show it. Necessity. When you run a place like this, you either learn to fix things yourself or go broke paying someone else to do it. They ate breakfast together at the kitchen table, the rain creating a cozy atmosphere that made conversation flow easily. Jessica found herself telling Murillo more about her life in Chicago, her job in healthcare marketing, the apartment she'd shared with her ex, the friends she'd left behind. "Do you miss it?" Murillo asked. "The city life?" Jessica considered the question. "Parts of it. I miss good Thai food delivered at midnight. I miss museums and concerts. But I don't miss the noise or the crowds or the constant pressure to be doing something important all the time. And what about the people? Your friends?" Jessica stared into her coffee cup. "I haven't reached out to anyone since I left. It's complicated. Most of our friends were really his friends first, and the ones who were mine." She sighed. "I couldn't face their pity, or their 'I told you so' looks." "They warned you about him?" Murillo asked gently. Jessica nodded. "My best friend Melissa never liked him, said he was too smooth, too perfect. I thought she was jealous. We had a huge fight about it right before he and I moved in together. We haven't really spoken since." "That's rough," Murillo said with genuine sympathy. "Losing a friend and a partner." "I've been thinking about calling her," Jessica admitted. "Since I've been here, actually. Getting some distance has helped me see things more clearly." "This place has a way of doing that," Murillo agreed, clearing the mind. After breakfast, despite the rain, they needed to check on the animals. Murillo lent Jessica his spare raincoat again, and they splashed through puddles to the barn. Inside, the animals were dry and comfortable, if a bit restless from being cooped up. The baby goats were especially energetic, bouncing off the walls of their pen and bleating for attention. Hope immediately recognized Jessica, pressing against the fence and reaching her little head through the slats for scratches. Jessica laughed, obliging the demanding kid. "She's definitely yours now," Murillo observed, watching the interaction with a smile. "She's just friendly," Jessica demurred. "No, she's bonded with you specifically," Murillo insisted. "Watch." He approached the pen and offered his hand to Hope. The kid sniffed it politely, but then immediately turned back to Jessica, bleating insistently. "See? You're her person." Jessica felt a pang at the thought of leaving in a few days, of never seeing Hope again. She pushed the feeling aside and focused on the tasks at hand. They spent the morning tending to the animals, then returned to the house for lunch. As Murillo had predicted, the rain began to ease around noon, and by early afternoon, patches of blue sky were visible between the clouds. "Perfect timing," Murillo said, looking out the window. "The garden will need checking after all that rain. Want to help me see what survived the downpour?" The garden was muddy but vibrant, the rain having intensified the colors of the plants. A few delicate flowers had been beaten down by the heavy drops, but most of the vegetables looked better than ever, glistening with leftover moisture. "It's beautiful," Jessica said, carefully stepping between rows of tomato plants heavy with fruit. "It's alive," Murillo replied, kneeling to examine a squash plant. "That's what I love about growing things. Every day is different. Every season brings new challenges and rewards." Jessica watched him as he worked, gently tying up plants that had fallen over in the rain, checking for signs of disease or pest damage. His hands were strong but incredibly gentle with the fragile stems and leaves. There was something deeply attractive about his quiet competence, his evident care for every living thing around him. When he caught her watching, Jessica didn't look away this time. Something was shifting between them, some invisible barrier dissolving like morning mist in sunlight. "You have mud on your cheek," she said, stepping closer. Murillo reached up to wipe it away, but missed the spot. Without thinking, Jessica moved, closer still, and brushed the smudge away with her thumb. His skin was warm beneath her fingers, and he went very still at her touch. For a moment they stood frozen, caught in each other's gaze. Jessica could feel her heart pounding in her chest, could see the subtle darkening of Murillo's eyes as they flicked down to her lips and back up. Then, a distant roll of thunder broke the spell, and Jessica stepped back, suddenly conscious of how close they were standing. "Looks like another storm coming," Murillo said, his voice slightly rough. Jessica nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They worked for another hour in the garden, harvesting vegetables that were ready and securing plants against the approaching weather. The conversation between them was lighter now, almost deliberately so, as if they both needed time to process what had almost happened. By late afternoon, dark clouds were rolling in again, and the wind had picked up. They finished their work just as the first heavy drops began to fall. Perfect timing, Murillo said as they reached the porch, the rain beginning to pour down behind them. I need to check the animals once more before dark. Why don't you get started? On dinner? Rosa left a casserole in the fridge that just needs heating up. Jessica agreed, secretly glad for a little time alone to sort through her swirling thoughts. In the kitchen, she found the casserole Rosa had prepared, some kind of savory chicken and rice dish that filled the house with delicious smells as it heated in the oven. Jessica set the table for two, an intimate dinner setting that suddenly seemed loaded with meaning. Outside, the storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows and lightning occasionally illuminating the darkening landscape. Jessica found herself glancing at the clock, worried about Murillo as the minutes ticked by. Finally, just as she was considering grabbing a raincoat and going to look for him, the back door burst open. Murillo stepped inside, soaking wet and carrying a small bundle wrapped in his jacket. What happened? Jessica asked, hurrying over. Found her huddled under the porch steps, Murillo explained, carefully unwrapping his burden to reveal a tiny, bedraggled kitten, grey with white paws. Poor things, half drowned and freezing. Jessica's heart melted at the sight of the pathetic creature. She needs to be dried off and warmed up, she said, immediately switching to caretaker mode. She took the kitten from Murillo and wrapped it in a clean kitchen towel, gently rubbing to stimulate circulation. The kitten mewed weakly but leaned into her touch. You get dried off too, she told Murillo, who was dripping all over the kitchen floor. I've got her. While Murillo went to change, Jessica continued warming the kitten, speaking softly to it and checking for any signs of injury. By the time Murillo returned in dry clothes, the kitten was purring faintly and looking much less pitiful. She seems okay, Jessica reported. Just cold and hungry, I think. We've got some kitten formula in the supply closet, Murillo said, from the last litter of barn cats. He retrieved the formula and prepared a small bottle while Jessica continued, holding the kitten. The tiny creature accepted the bottle eagerly, sucking down the warm formula with surprising strength. She's a fighter, Murillo observed, watching Jessica feed the kitten. Like someone else I know. Jessica looked up to find him watching her with that same intense gaze from the garden. This time, there was no thunder to break the moment. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken feelings. Murillo, Jessica began, not sure what she wanted to say, but feeling the need to say something. Dinner smells like it's ready, he interrupted gently, nodding toward the oven where the casserole was indeed beginning to bubble over. The moment passed as Jessica handed him the kitten and hurried to rescue their meal. By the time they sat down to eat, the conversation had returned to safer topics, the animals, the garden, plans for tomorrow. After dinner, they settled in the living room with the kitten, who was now sleeping contentedly in a box lined with soft towels. The storm continued outside, rain beating against the windows and wind howling around the corners of the house. Will Rosa be okay in town? Jessica asked, curled up on one end of the sofa with a mug of tea. She'll be fine, Murillo assured her, from his armchair across the room. Her sister has a spare room that's practically Rosa's second home. She stays there whenever the weather's bad. They fell into comfortable silence, listening to the storm. Jessica found herself studying Murillo, again, noting the way the lamplight softened his features, catching golden highlights in his dark hair. Tell me something I don't know about you, she said suddenly. Murillo looked surprised, then thoughtful. Like what? Anything. Something no one else knows. He considered for a moment. I can't swim, he admitted finally. Jessica's eyebrows shot up. Really? But there's a pond on the property, I've seen it. That's why I can't swim, Murillo explained with a rueful smile. When I was 6, my cousin pushed me in. I sank like a stone. My father had to jump in and pull me out. I've been terrified of deep water ever since. I could teach you, Jessica offered without thinking. I was on the swim team in high school. As soon as the words left her mouth, she realized the implication that she'd still be around long enough to teach him anything. Murillo clearly caught it too. Something flickered in his eyes, but he didn't comment on it. Your turn, he said instead. Tell me something I don't know about you. Jessica thought for a moment. I've never had a pet, she confessed. Not even a goldfish. My mom was allergic to everything with fur, and my dad didn't like animals in the house. Then I was always moving around, apartment to apartment, and it never seemed fair to get a pet when I couldn't offer stability. That explains why you're so taken with Hope, Murillo observed. And now this little one. He nodded toward the sleeping kitten. I've always wanted to rescue something, Jessica said softly. To be the person who makes a difference in some small life. You are that person, Murillo told her, his voice equally soft. To Hope. To this kitten. Maybe to others too. Their eyes met across the room, and Jessica felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the tea she was drinking. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out, plunging the room into darkness. Stay put, Murillo said calmly. There are candles in the kitchen drawer. I'll get them. Jessica heard him moving carefully across the room, then the sound of a drawer opening and closing. A moment later, a match flared, and Murillo's face appeared in the warm glow as he lit a candle. He lit several more and placed them around the living room, creating a cozy, intimate atmosphere that made the storm outside seem even more distant. Power goes out pretty regularly during storms, he explained, returning to his chair. The generator will kick in automatically for the barn to keep the heat lamps going for the baby animals, but we don't usually bother with it for the house unless the outage lasts more than a few hours. The candlelight cast dancing shadows on the walls, and Jessica found herself relaxing into the unexpected romance of the situation. It felt like they were the only two people in the world, sheltered together against the elements. This is nice, she said, surprised to realize she meant it. A year ago, a power outage would have sent her into a panic. No Wi-Fi, no Netflix, no way to charge her devices. Now it felt like a gift, this enforced pause from the modern world. It is, Murillo agreed, his eyes reflecting the candle flames. Sometimes it takes losing power to make us appreciate simpler things. Like what? Jessica asked. Like conversation, candlelight, the sound of rain on the roof. He paused, then added softly, good company. Jessica felt a flutter in her chest at his words. I've enjoyed being here, she admitted. More than I expected to. I've enjoyed having you here, Murillo replied. More than I expected to as well. The hair between them seemed to thicken again, charged with possibilities. Jessica, Murillo began, then hesitated. I know you're only here for a week. I know you're planning to leave soon, but... A loud crack of thunder directly overhead interrupted, him making them both jump. The kitten woke with a startled mew, and Jessica immediately went to comfort it, scooping the tiny creature into her hands. It's okay, little one, she murmured, stroking its soft fur. Just a storm. It'll pass. Murillo watched her, the moment, for whatever he'd been about to say clearly lost. She needs a name, he said instead. Jessica considered the kitten, who was already settling back to sleep in her palm. What about Storm? Since that's how we found her. Storm, Murillo repeated, nodding. It suits her. They stayed up late into the night, talking by candlelight as the storm gradually moved off, and the rain gentled to a steady patter. Jessica learned more about Murillo's childhood on the farm, about his dreams for expanding the animal sanctuary, part of the operation, about his favorite books and movies. In turn, she shared stories from her own life, her brief, disastrous attempt at art school before settling on a marketing degree, her close relationship with her grandmother, who had passed away the previous year, her secret dream of someday writing a children's book. You should do it, Murillo encouraged her. Write that book, maybe about a little goat named Hope or a kitten called Storm. Jessica smiled at the thought. Maybe I will, someday. When Jessica finally yawned, unable to fight her tiredness any longer, Murillo stood and offered his hand to help her up from the couch. You should get some rest, he said. Take Storm with you. She'll need feeding again in a few hours. Jessica accepted his hand, noticing how perfectly hers seemed to fit within it. As she stood, she found herself much closer to him than she'd expected, close enough to see the faint stubble on his jaw, to catch the clean scent of his soap. Neither of them moved away. For a heartbeat, then two, they stood in the candlelight, hands still clasped, eyes locked. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Murillo leaned forward and brushed his lips against hers, a question more than a kiss. Jessica answered by leaning in, turning the gentle contact into something deeper, something that sent warmth spreading through her entire body. When they finally broke apart, Jessica was breathless, her heart pounding. "I've been wanting to do that since you named that baby goat," Murillo admitted, his voice husky. Jessica smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. "I've been wanting you to do that maybe since you handed me that baby goat." Murillo laughed softly, reaching up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "We should talk about this, about what it means, but not tonight." Jessica nodded, understanding. "Tomorrow," she agreed. He leaned in and kissed her once more, briefly, but with a promise of more to come. "Good night, Jessica." "Good night, Murillo." Jessica climbed the stairs to her room, kitten in one hand, candle in the other, her lips still tingling from Murillo's kiss. Her mind was spinning with questions and possibilities. She'd come to Santa Lucia, planning to stay for only a week, to rest and recover before moving on to where? She realized she had never had a destination in mind, only an escape. But now, for the first time since leaving Chicago, she was thinking about staying somewhere, about putting down roots. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying as she settled into bed, Storm curled against her neck. Jessica found herself counting days. She'd been at the farm for 4 days now. Her arrangement had been for 1 week of work. That meant she was supposed to leave in 3 days. The thought, which had once been a comfort, now felt like a deadline looming over her, threatening this fragile new happiness she'd found. Morning came with sunshine streaming through Jessica's window, the storm having passed during the night. She woke to find Storm still curled beside her, purring contentedly. Downstairs, Murillo was already in the kitchen making breakfast. He looked up when she entered, his face breaking into a smile that made her heart skip. "Morning," he greeted her, somehow managing to convey a world of meaning in that single word. "Morning," she replied, equally laden with unspoken thoughts. They moved around each other in the kitchen with a new awareness, hands brushing as they reached for the same item, eyes meeting and holding for a beat longer than necessary. The air between them seemed charged with electricity, with possibility. Over breakfast they talked about the day ahead, animals to tend, storm damage to assess, a fence that needed mending. Normal everyday tasks made extraordinary by the knowledge that everything had changed between them. "About last night," Murillo began as they cleared the breakfast dishes. "I don't regret it," Jessica said quickly. "If that's what you're wondering." Relief crossed his face. "I don't either, not for a second, but I know your situation is complicated. You're only here temporarily. You've just come out of a bad relationship. I don't want to pressure you or rush you into something you're not ready for." Jessica appreciated his honesty, his consideration. "I am still healing," she admitted. "And yes, I did only plan to be here for a week, but being here with you, with the animals, it's changed something in me, Murillo. I feel more like myself than I have in years." Murillo's eyes softened. "I've seen that change happening. You're different from the woman who arrived here 4 days ago. In a good way, I hope," Jessica said with a small smile. "In the best way," Murillo assured her. He hesitated, then added, "I'm not good at this, at saying how I feel, but I want you to know that these past few days with you have been special. You're special, Jessica, to me." Jessica felt a warmth bloom in her chest at his words. "You're special to me too," she said softly. He reached across the table and took her hand in his. "I'm not asking for promises. I know you have a lot to figure out. I just want you to know that whatever you decide, whether you stay or go, these days with you have mattered." Jessica squeezed his hand, suddenly fighting back tears. No one had ever spoken to her with such honesty, such genuine care for her feelings and needs. "Thank you," she whispered, "for understanding, for not pushing." Murillo nodded, bringing her hand to his lips for a gentle kiss that sent shivers up her arm. "Now," he said, his tone lightening, "we have a farm to run, and a certain baby goat who's probably wondering where her favorite human is." The day passed in a blur of activity. The storm had brought down several tree limbs, one of which had damaged a section of fence in the horse paddock. Jessica and Murillo worked side by side to repair it, their conversation flowing easily between serious topics and playful banter. In the afternoon, Rosa returned from town bringing mail and supplies. She took one look at Jessica and Murillo working, together by the barn, and raised a knowing eyebrow but said nothing. That evening, as the three of them sat down to dinner, Rosa finally broke her silence on the matter. "So," she said, looking between them with a twinkle in her eye, "what did I miss while I was gone?" Murillo choked slightly on his water, and Jessica felt her cheeks warm. "The storm brought down some branches," Murillo said, recovering. "We had to fix the north fence. Power went out for a few hours." "Mm-hmm," Rosa hummed skeptically. "And that's all that happened, is it?" Murillo shot Jessica a glance that was half amusement, half apology. "We also found a kitten," he offered. Jessica named her Storm. "A kitten. How nice," Rosa said, clearly not fooled. "And I suppose this kitten is the reason you two can't stop looking at each other like lovesick teenagers?" Jessica nearly choked on her food this time, and Murillo let out a resigned sigh. "Rosa," he said warningly. The older woman held up her hands in surrender, but her eyes were twinkling with delight. "None of my business, I know, but it's about time, is all I'm saying." After dinner, Jessica escaped to the porch, needing a moment to process everything. The night was clear after the storm, stars twinkling overhead in a velvety black sky. She sat on the swing, gently pushing with her foot to set it in motion. The screen door opened behind her, and Murillo stepped out. "Mind if I join you?" Jessica moved over, making room for him on the swing. They sat in companionable silence for a while, looking up at the stars. "Rosa means well," Murillo said finally. "She's been worried about me being alone for too long." "She cares about you," Jessica replied. "That's a good thing. She cares about you too, you know, already. She told me so tonight while you were checking." On the kitten. Jessica felt a pang at the thought. In less than a week, she'd found more genuine connection on this farm than she'd had in years in Chicago. The thought of leaving was becoming more painful by the hour. "Murillo," she began, not sure what she was going to say, but feeling the need to say something. He turned to her, his eyes serious in the moonlight. "I meant what I said this morning. No pressure, no expectations." Jessica nodded, grateful for his understanding. "It's just everything is happening so fast. A week ago I was running away from a broken heart, convinced I'd never trust anyone again. And now, Murillo prompted gently. "And now, I'm sitting here with you, feeling things I didn't think I'd ever feel again. It's wonderful and terrifying all at once." Murillo reached for her hand, interlacing their fingers. "I know," he said simply. "Me too." They sat together on the porch swing, hands linked, watching the stars shine overhead. No promises were made, no plans discussed. But as the night deepened around them, Jessica found herself thinking less about leaving and more about what it might mean to stay. The next morning, Jessica woke with the realization that she had only 2 days left at Santa Lucia Farm. The thought sat like a stone in her stomach as she dressed and made her way downstairs. She found Rosa in the kitchen, humming as she prepared breakfast. "Good morning, dear," the older woman greeted her. "Sleep well?" "Well enough," Jessica replied, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Where's Murillo?" "Gone to town to pick up a feed delivery," Rosa said. "Should be back before lunch." She studied Jessica's face for a moment, then added gently, "You look troubled this morning." Jessica sighed, sinking into a chair at the kitchen table. "I'm supposed to leave in 2 days." Rosa nodded, understanding immediately. "And now you're not sure if you want to." "I don't know what I want," Jessica admitted. "Or maybe I do and I'm just scared to admit it." Rosa sat down across from her, her weathered hands cradling a mug of tea. "Fear is a poor compass, child. It'll lead you away from things, but never toward them." "What if I stay and it doesn't work out?" Jessica voiced her deepest fear. "What if I'm misreading everything, or what if we try and fail?" "What if the sun doesn't rise tomorrow?" Rosa countered. "What if the rain falls upward? We can't live our lives afraid of what might go wrong." I thought I knew what I wanted before, Jessica said quietly. With my ex in Chicago, I was so sure he was the one, that we were building a life together. And I was completely wrong. Rosa reached across the table and patted Jessica's hand. Being wrong once doesn't mean you'll be wrong again. Besides, Murillo isn't your ex. Not even close. How can you be so sure? Because I've known that boy since he was born, Rosa said simply. I've watched him grow into a man with a heart as big as this farm. He doesn't give his affection easily, but when he does, it's true. Jessica felt tears prick at her eyes. I didn't come here looking for this, for him. The best things in life are rarely the ones we're looking for, Rosa said with a gentle smile. They're the ones that find us when we least expect them. After breakfast, Jessica went to check on Storm, who was thriving under her care. The kitten's eyes were bright, and she pounced on Jessica's fingers with newfound energy. You're feeling better, aren't you? Jessica murmured, stroking the soft grey fur. All you needed was a little love and care. With Storm tucked in the pocket of her oversized shirt, Jessica made her way to the goat pen. Hope spotted her immediately, bleating excitedly and running to the fence. The other baby goats followed, creating a chorus of demands for attention. Jessica laughed, kneeling down to pet the eager kids through the fence slats. Hope pushed her way to the front, jealously guarding her position as Jessica's favorite. Don't worry, Jessica told her, scratching behind her ears. You'll always be my first. The morning passed quickly as Jessica worked through her usual farm chores, her mind constantly circling back to the decision looming before her. Stay or go? Put down roots or keep running? Around noon, she heard the rumble of Murillo's truck coming up the drive. Her heart quickened at the sound, and she had to smile at her own reaction. When had she turned into someone who got butterflies at the mere approach of a man? Murillo found her in the barn, organizing the tack room. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her work with an expression that made her cheeks warm. Hey, he said simply. Hey yourself, she replied, setting down the bridle she'd been hanging. How was town? Same as always. Mrs. Henderson at the post office asked about you. Jessica raised her eyebrows. About me? How does she even know I exist? Murillo chuckled. Small town. News travels fast. Rosa probably mentioned you to her sister, who told her neighbor, who happens to be Mrs. Henderson's cousin. And what did you tell her? Jessica asked, curious. That you're helping out at the farm for a while. Murillo pushed off from the doorframe and stepped closer. I didn't mention that you're planning to leave soon. The unspoken question hung in the air between them. Murillo, Jessica began, her heart pounding. About that, Miguel's back. Rosa's voice called from outside the barn. Come say hello. The moment broken, Murillo gave Jessica a small smile. We'll talk later, he promised, then led the way outside. Miguel, the farm manager Rosa had mentioned, turned out to be a burly man in his 40s with a friendly face and a booming laugh. He greeted Jessica warmly, making her feel as if they'd known each other for years rather than minutes. So you're the city girl who's been helping out, he said, shaking her hand firmly. Rosa says you've got away with the animals. Just beginners. Luck, Jessica demurred. Don't believe it, Murillo cut in. She's a natural. Even got Penny to trust her on the first try. Miguel whistled, impressed. That skittish mare, now that's something. They spent the afternoon bringing Miguel up to speed on everything that had happened during his absence. Jessica watched Murillo with him, noting the easy camaraderie between them. It was clear that Miguel wasn't just an employee, but a friend, almost family. Rosa told me you found a kitten in the storm, Miguel said to Jessica as they walked back to the house for dinner. Where is the little one now? Asleep in my room, Jessica replied. She's still tiny, but she's got a fighter's spirit. Like someone else I know, Miguel said with a meaningful glance toward Murillo, who was walking ahead of them with Rosa. Jessica looked at him surprised. What do you mean? Miguel chuckled. Just that I haven't seen the boss look this happy ever. And I've known him since he was a skinny teenager trying to prove he could run this place after his parents died. He's a good man, Jessica said softly. One of the best, Miguel agreed. But lonely. Too much responsibility, too young can do that to a person. He gave her a sidelong glance. It's good to see him smile again. Dinner that night was a lively affair, with Miguel sharing stories from his visit to his family and Rosa fussing over everyone with her usual motherly care. Jessica found herself laughing more than she had in months, feeling part of something warm and real. After the meal, Murillo suggested a walk to the pond to watch the sunset. Jessica agreed readily, eager for a chance to be alone with him, to try, again to express the thoughts that had been swirling in her mind all day. The pond was beautiful in the golden evening light, surrounded by weeping willows whose branches danced in the gentle breeze. They sat on a wooden bench facing the water, close enough that their shoulders touched. "This is my favorite spot on the farm," Murillo told her. "Even though I can't swim, I love being near the water, watching it, listening to it." "It's peaceful," Jessica agreed. "Like time slows down here." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, reflected perfectly in the still water of the pond. "Jessica," Murillo finally said, turning to face her, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." She nodded, her heart suddenly racing. "Okay. Are you still planning to leave the day after tomorrow?" The question, so simply put, still took her breath away. Jessica looked out at the pond, gathering her thoughts. "When I came here," she began, slowly, "all I wanted was a place to hide for a week, somewhere quiet where I could lick my wounds and figure out my next move." She turned to meet his gaze. "I never expected to find this you. A place that feels more like home after a few days than my apartment in Chicago ever did in 3 years." Hope flickered in Murillo's eyes. "Does that mean you're considering staying?" "I'm more than considering it," Jessica admitted. "But it also terrifies me. Everything's happening so fast. A week ago we were strangers." "Sometimes a week is all it takes," Murillo said softly. "Sometimes you just know." "How can you be so sure?" Jessica asked. "About me, about us, you barely know me." Murillo took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "I know that you name baby goats Hope and rescue kittens in storms. I know that you talk to animals when you think no one's listening. I know that you're brave enough to leave behind everything familiar and start over. I know that when you smile, really smile, it lights up your whole face." He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know that I've never felt this way about anyone, not even Elena. And yes, it's fast, and yes, it's scary, but it's also real." Jessica felt tears welling up. "I'm afraid of making another mistake," she whispered, "of trusting the wrong person again." "I can't promise we won't ever hurt each other," Murillo said honestly, "but I can promise that I will never deliberately cause you pain, that I will always be honest with you, even when it's hard, that I will do everything in my power to be worthy of your trust." A tear slipped down Jessica's cheek, and Murillo reached up to brush it away. The tenderness of the gesture undid her completely. "Ask me," she said, her voice barely audible. "What?" Murillo looked confused. "Ask me to stay," Jessica clarified, her heart pounding. "Please," understanding dawned in Murillo's eyes, followed by a smile that took her breath away. "Jessica," he said, taking both her hands in his, "you've only been here a week, but this place already feels like it's yours. You belong here, with the animals, with Rosa and Miguel, and with me. Stay. Not just for another week, but for as long as it feels right. Stay and see where this leads us." Jessica took a deep breath, feeling as if she stood on the edge of a cliff. But instead of fear, she felt a sudden, exhilarating sense of rightness. "Yes," she said simply. "I'll stay." The joy that lit Murillo's face was worth every moment of doubt, every mile she'd traveled to find this place. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. When they finally broke apart, the sun had slipped below the horizon, leaving the sky awash in soft purples and deep blues. The first stars were beginning to appear, twinkling promises of light in the gathering darkness. "We should head back," Murillo said reluctantly. "Rosa will be wondering where we are." Hand in hand, they walked back toward the farmhouse, its windows glowing with warm light in the dusk. Jessica felt a sense of peace settling over her, as if pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known she was solving had finally fallen into place. Rosa was waiting on the porch, rocking gently in the swing. When she saw them approaching, hands linked, she broke into a knowing smile. "About time you two came back," she called. "I was beginning to think you'd run off and eloped." Murillo laughed. "Not yet, Rosa. Give us at least a month." Jessica's heart skipped at the casual implication of a future, a someday. She squeezed Murillo's hand, and he returned the pressure, a silent acknowledgement of promises yet to be made. Rosa studied their faces, then nodded in satisfaction. "Well, I can see I don't need to ask what you decided. It's written all over both of you." She stood, stretching with a slight groan. "I'm off to bed. Don't stay up too late, you two. Farm doesn't run itself, even for lovers." As Rosa disappeared, inside Jessica felt her cheeks warm at the older woman's bluntness. "She doesn't mince words, does she?" "Never has, never will," Murillo agreed with a chuckle, "but she's rarely wrong." They settled onto the porch swing, Murillo's arm around Jessica's, shoulders as they rocked gently in the evening air. The familiar sounds of the farm at night surrounded them, crickets chirping, occasional lowing from the cattle, the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. "I should call my friend Melissa," Jessica said after a while. "Tell her where I am, that I'm okay, maybe try to mend that fence." "I think that's a good idea," Murillo agreed. "And maybe someday she can come visit, see this place, meet the animals, meet me." Jessica smiled at the thought. "She'd like you, and she'd love Hope and Storm." "Speaking of Storm," Murillo said, "I think she needs a permanent home, don't you?" Jessica looked up at him, understanding his meaning. "Are you saying I should adopt her?" "I'm saying she's already adopted you," Murillo pointed out. "Just making it official." Jessica laughed, leaning into his embrace. "I guess I'm becoming a pet owner after all." They stayed on the porch until the night grew cool, talking about everything and nothing. Immediate plans for the farm, Jessica's belongings still in storage in Chicago, dreams for the future that somehow now included each other. When Jessica finally yawned, unable to hide her tiredness, Murillo walked her to the foot of the stairs. "Tomorrow we'll move your things to one of the permanent rooms," he said. "The blue one at the end of the hall has the best view of the sunrise." Jessica smiled at his thoughtfulness. "That sounds perfect." He leaned down and kissed her gently. "Good night, Jessica." "Good night, Murillo." Upstairs, Jessica found Storm curled up in the center of her bed, fast asleep. As she got ready for bed, she caught sight of her reflection in the mirror and paused, struck by the difference in the woman looking back at her. The shadows under her eyes had faded, and there was a softness to her expression that had been missing for a long time. She looked happy. Jessica slipped into bed, careful not to disturb the sleeping kitten. Tomorrow she'd been scheduled to leave, to continue her aimless journey away from pain. Instead, she was starting a new journey toward something hopeful, something real. Sleep came easily that night, deep and dreamless. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Jessica woke to find Storm gone from the bed, and the sounds of activity already coming from downstairs. She dressed quickly and headed down to find the kitchen bustling with energy. Murillo, Rosa, and Miguel were gathered around the table, maps and papers spread out before them. They looked up when she entered, their faces bright with excitement. "Just in time," Murillo said, pulling out a chair for her. "We're planning the new animal shelter expansion." "New expansion?" Jessica asked, sitting down and accepting the cup of coffee Rosa handed her. "Miguel's brought back some great news," Murillo explained. "The Henderson property next door is up for sale. It's perfect for expanding the sanctuary, 10 acres, a good barn already in place. We've been hoping it would come on the market for years." "That's wonderful," Jessica said, genuinely excited for them. "Are you going to make an offer?" "Already have," Miguel said with a grin. "Called Henderson first thing this morning. He's willing to sell to Murillo for under market value since he knows the land will be put to good use." Jessica looked at the plans spread across the table, sketches for new animal enclosures, a small visitor center, even a classroom space for educational programs. "This is amazing," she said, taking it all in. "You've obviously been planning this for a while." "Years," Murillo admitted. "Just never had the right timing or the right team." His eyes met hers meaningfully. "Team?" Jessica echoed. Rosa snorted. "What he's trying to say, dear, is that he wants you to be part of this, all of it. The expansion, the farm, his life." Murillo shot Rosa an exasperated look, but didn't contradict her. I was going to be a bit more subtle about it, but essentially, yes, he turned to Jessica. You mentioned your marketing background yesterday. We could use someone with those skills to help get the word out about the sanctuary, apply for grants, that sort of thing. If you're interested, that is. Jessica felt a surge of excitement at the thought. Using her professional skills for something she truly cared about, rather than just to earn a paycheck, was appealing in a way her corporate job had never been. I'm definitely interested, she said. In fact, I already have some ideas. They spent the morning around the kitchen table, Jessica contributing marketing suggestions, Miguel offering practical construction advice, Rosa keeping everyone supplied with coffee and her clear-eyed wisdom. It felt natural, collaborative, like a family working together toward a shared vision. By lunchtime, they had a solid plan in place. Miguel headed out to the fields, and Rosa went to start the laundry, leaving Jessica and Murillo alone in the kitchen. Thank you, Murillo said, gathering up the papers and maps. For what? Jessica asked. For your ideas, for your enthusiasm, for staying. He looked up at her, his eyes serious. I want you to know that the job offer, it's not charity or an excuse to keep you here. You have skills we genuinely need. This would be a real position, with a real salary. Jessica appreciated his directness. I wouldn't have it any other way, she assured him. I want to contribute, to earn my place here. Your place is already earned, Murillo said softly. But I understand. After lunch, they moved Jessica's belongings to the blue room at the end of the hall, a larger, brighter space with windows that looked out over the fields and distant hills. It took only a few minutes to transfer her few possessions, a reminder of how little she'd brought with her to Santa Lucia. We can drive into the city next week, Murillo suggested as they finished. Get the rest of your things from storage. Jessica smiled at the thought. I'd like that. Though I might donate most of it. A fresh start deserves fresh things. Fresh things, Murillo agreed, and a few keepsakes worth holding on to. The afternoon was spent with the animals, feeding, grooming, mucking out stalls. Work that a week. Ergo would have seemed foreign and daunting, now felt familiar, almost meditative. Jessica found herself humming as she worked, catching Murillo's eye occasionally across the barn, exchanging smiles that held new meaning. In the goat pen, Hope demanded, her usual attention, climbing into Jessica's lap the moment she sat down. You knew all along, didn't you? Jessica murmured to the little goat, that I'd stay, that this would become home. Hope bleated softly, as if in agreement, and butted her head against Jessica's hand for more scratches. As evening approached, Murillo found Jessica in the garden harvesting tomatoes for dinner. I have something to show you, he said, holding out his hand. Jessica took it, allowing him to lead her around the back of the barn to a small, weathered shed she hadn't noticed before. Murillo unlocked the door and flipped on a light, revealing a simply furnished room with a desk, a worn armchair, and walls lined with bookshelves. My father's writing room, Murillo explained. He used to come out here in the evenings to write. In his journals read, just be alone with his thoughts. He looked around the space with obvious affection. No one's used it since he died, but I thought, with your interest in writing, you might like it. Jessica stepped into the room, running her fingers along the spines of the books, feeling the lingering presence of Murillo's father in the well-worn furniture, the carefully arranged desk. Are you sure? She asked, touched by the gesture. This seems so personal. I'm sure, Murillo said simply. He would have liked you, and he always believed spaces should be used, not preserved like museums. Jessica turned to him, overwhelmed by the trust implicit in his offer. Thank you. I'll take good care of it. I know you will. Murillo reached into his pocket and pulled out a small brass key. This is yours now, to use whenever you want some quiet time to write that children's book. Jessica accepted the key, its weight in her palm symbolizing so much more than just access to a room. It was trust, acceptance, a place of her own within his world. They walked back to the house hand in hand, the evening sun casting long shadows across the fields. Rosa had outdone herself for dinner, preparing a feast that felt like a celebration, though no one explicitly said what they were celebrating. After the meal, as they sat on the porch watching the stars come out, Jessica felt a contentment she hadn't known was possible. Murilo sat beside her on the swing, his arm around her shoulders, Storm purring in her lap. "A week ago today, I was on a bus to nowhere," Jessica mused, "just running away with no destination in mind. And now?" Murilo asked. "Now I'm exactly where I need to be," Jessica said with certainty. "With you, with the animals, with this place, it feels like home," Murilo finished for her. "Yes," Jessica agreed. "Home." The evening breeze carried the scent of Rosa's flowers, the distant sound of the horses nickering to each other, the gentle creak of the porch swing, all the small ordinary sounds and scents that had become precious to Jessica in just a week. She thought about the path that had led her here, the heartbreak in Chicago, the desperate flight, the random newspaper ad that had caught her eye. So many chances for things to have gone differently, for her to have missed this place, these people, this man beside her. "What are you thinking about?" Murilo asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "How easily I could have missed all this," Jessica replied honestly. "If I'd chosen a different bus, or if Rosa hadn't answered when I called, or if I'd been too proud to take a farm job. Some things are meant to be," Murilo said simply. "My mother used to say that the heart always finds its way home, even when the mind isn't sure where it's going." Jessica smiled at the thought. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Murilo agreed. "She would have adored you." They fell silent again, comfortable in each other's presence. No need for constant conversation. Storm stretched in Jessica's lap, then jumped down to explore the porch. Hope and the other baby goats were visible in their pen in the distance, settling down for the night. "Murilo," Jessica said after a while. "What happens now? With us, I mean." He considered the question, his arm tightening slightly around her shoulders. "Now we take it one day at a time. We get to know each other better. We work together, live together, see where this leads us." He looked down at her, his eyes serious in the darkness. "I'm not in a hurry, Jessica. We have time." The words were exactly what she needed to hear, acknowledgement of the connection between them, but no pressure, no expectations that she wasn't ready to meet. Just the promise of days together, of a relationship allowed to grow naturally. "Thank you," she said softly, "for understanding, for giving me space to heal while still making me feel wanted." Murilo leaned down and kissed her gently. "You are wanted," he assured her. "Here, with me, for as long as you choose to stay." Jessica rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. "I think I might stay a while," she murmured. "Maybe a long while." Murilo's chuckle rumbled through his chest. "I was hoping you'd say that." Above them, stars filled the night sky, countless points of light in the darkness. The moon rose slowly over the eastern fields, casting a silver glow across the land. Santa Lucia Farm lay peaceful under the night sky, all its creatures, human and animal alike, safe and at home. Jessica closed her eyes, breathing in the night air, committing this moment to memory. She had come to Santa Lucia with a wounded heart and a single backpack, planning to stay for just a week before moving on. Instead, she had found healing, purpose, and a love she hadn't been looking for. She had found home. It was only supposed to be a week, she whispered, more to herself than to Murilo. He heard her anyway, his voice gentle as he replied, "Sometimes a week is all it takes to change a life." Jessica smiled, knowing he was right. A week had changed everything, and now she had all the time in the world to discover what came next. "Stay a little longer?" Murilo asked softly, echoing the question he had first asked her in the orchard. Days ago, Jessica looked up at him, her heart full. "Yes," she said simply, "I'll stay." And in that moment, on a porch swing under a sky full of stars, surrounded by the gentle sounds of the farm at night, Jessica knew she had finally found where she belonged. Not just for a week or a month or a year, but for as long as her heart called this place and this man home. The end.